President Museveni is expected to reshuffle and announce his new cabinet by the end of June. Bouncing back is to the discretion of the president. This is normally based on performance and whether one is an MP. But also the Constitution gives him powers to appoint two people to his cabinet, though they are not MPs. But too much pressure now placed underneath many cabinet ministers are uncertain on whether they will bounce back in Museveni's new cabinet. But for those who think they have performed, are not afraid of speaking about themselves.
I have performed extremely very well, I must say. As you know, my role is until the cabinet is dissolved, that I've been promoting investment in the country. And over the years, investment in the country has averaged about $1 billion annually into the country. And this is also evidenced by the fact that if you go to Namab Industrial Park, which was dormant and dead, right now you see so many factories that have come up because of the strict rules that were imposed in terms of allocation of land to investors, and the fact that we gave them 18 months within which to develop or we take it back. So I think from that perspective, I would say that my tenure has been very, very successful.
I think I've performed well, really, given the tasks which have been available, and given the fact that, yes, the appointing authority has exhibited confidence in me. That's why during the last 5 years there has not been any reshuffle as far as I'm concerned. So I think I've performed well.
Their confessions form our night's analysis over their performances and their respective dockets. First is State Minister for Investment Gabriel Ajedra Aridru. Though he claims that during his 4-year tenure as State Minister for Investment, he managed to attract over $1 billion annually to the economy, but with the higher levels of unemployment. One doubts the reflection of the $1 billion annually he claims to be attracting into the economy. But on the spot, he reveals that some investors have confirmed investing in some regions of the country to address the problem of unemployment. But what are those investments and where?
A number of other investors who are in the process of setting up their businesses. For example, the National Cement Company of Uganda, which is setting up in Tororo and Moroto, specifically to do clinker. We have the second largest rice milling plant in Africa, and that is also located in Namamve. Quite a number of companies have come in over the last 4 years.
However, every success story often has a down part, and for any economy to grow, industrial parks must be in place. Has the Ministry of Trade and Investment done anything to put in place industrial parks, or it has been a down factor in the performance of State Minister Ajedra?
I think if you ask me what probably I would have wished to have been done, is that we did not have, we were not able to secure funding for the infrastructure in the industrial parks. As you know, an industrial park requires infrastructure, and that is road network. You need water, you need the ICT, you need the power reticulation, you need the sewage. So those are the things that need to be done to support our investors, both local and foreign. I'm not saying just foreign investors, but local and foreign. So lack of funding towards the industrial park has been, I think, one of my biggest constraints. But what we have put in plan is that for Mbala Industrial Park, we intend to do the infrastructure before the land allocation. What was done in Namova was not appropriate. They allocated the land before the infrastructure. So I think this time around, our recommendation is that we need to do the industrial park first before we allocate it to investors, so that we do not have these challenges of lack of power, lack of water, and so on.
Basing on this disappointment in his performance, I asked him what are his chances of bouncing back in Museveni's new cabinet as a state minister.
You see, that is the prerogative of His Excellency the President. Of course, he knows who has been performing well in the cabinet and who has not been performing, and those who have been elected, those who have not come back as members of parliament. That really is his prerogative. But also, most importantly, you see, leadership comes from God. He uses people. God uses people to place them in positions of responsibility. So that I will leave it to God and His Excellency the President.
While Ajedra is uncertain of his bounce back to cabinet, another minister to watch out is Mukasa, the man who has been shuttled from 2 ministerial positions in a space of 5 years. Upon the announcement of the current cabinet in 2011, he was appointed as Minister for National Security, a docket charged with the responsibility of coordinating intelligence agencies of the state. But what were his terms of references when he was appointed before he was reappointed as Minister for Gender, Labour and Social Development in the Cabinet shake-up of 2014?
Docket of security that yes, from time to time assess the situation, the security situation, make the necessary reports, and then coordinate all these other activities with the various security agencies. I think during that time, yes, I did my job fairly well and were able not to have serious security problems during that time. So I think I did a good job.
During Mukasa's tenure as Minister of National Security, the country witnessed a situation where many citizens took laws in their own hands. Many people died in political demonstrations and others locked up in jails. Some to date still serve their sentences.
Well, I think during that time the most challenging points were not so much security, but political activities threatening, the security situation. Things like demonstrations, various statements which cause fear, among the people, incitements and so on. I think these were the most challenging situations.
Was his tenure that the country saw massive recruitment of ADF rebels in eastern Uganda, also regrouping of these Ugandan rebel group in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, whereas government managed to contain the situation with the number of arrests of ADF rebel collaborators and mysterious assassinations of Muslim sheikhs. Mukasa downplays that turbulence then in the national security.
These other more serious security problems, fortunately, had been seriously degraded, like, ADF, LRA. Those had been seriously degraded. They were there, but not so serious as really to upset.
One of the other biggest storms in his performance as National Security Minister was the self-exilment of the National Coordinator of Intelligence Organizations of the state, Renegade General David Sejusa, who had a desk in his office. I asked him whether the exit of Sejusa from the country without his notice wasn't a challenge to him to account to the appointing authority.
Not at all. The impression was that Sejusa was such a big central figure in the security circles that if he left, maybe there would be ripple, there would be an upheaval. Not at all. Because Sejusa had a set of duties he was carrying out. When he left, those duties were transferred. And of course, his leaving became inconsequential. Yeah, so that was not very serious.
Whereas Renegade General Sejusa had not notified him about his exit out of the country for a self-exile 1.5-year experience in the United Kingdom. Even the Chief of Defense Forces, General Edward Katumba Amala, was never informed, but only sought for leave of Parliament of 30 days from the office of the Speaker of Parliament. Raised suspicion in the manner how Minister Muruli Mukasa operated the security docket without commanding respect from people like Renegade General Sejusa.
Left. Apparently he had left normally because he had asked for some permission to go away. and that permission had been granted by Parliament, only to reach there and declare other intentions. But even then, when he went there, tried this and that, it didn't work out. So that was not really a challenging moment. The challenging moment was here, internally, when people were being diverted from what was important, in other words, economic production, to some other really non-essential activities like demonstrations, riots here and there, and so forth. Well, these have the tendency of disrupting the normal life and disorienting the focus of people to issues which matter to them and which are important. And they somehow conjure some fear.
This was the last debacle he faced while he served as Minister of National Security and formed the basis of his transfer to the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development in the early 2014 cabinet reshuffle. I asked him of his new challenges at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development.
Well, ups and downs, maybe not many downs, but many ups. In that, as far as the mandate of the Gender Ministry is concerned, we've been able to get a lot of legislation through Parliament. Many policy issues have been finalized, and we have, I think, established a new approach to gender issues.
However, he holds another story to tell about his success at the Ministry of Gender.
Laws, the election of union workers, that one has the election of the elderly persons, the election of the women, and so on. And we brought about also we assisted a private member really steer through the children's bill. All these have been done within a space, a very short time of just under 1 year, and many others, plus other policies, the employment policy, the youth policy, the early childhood development policy. All these have come on board within that short space. So really, I think in the gender docket, we have been able to push to our mandate maybe another milestone.
As he ponders on whether he will be retained in the next cabinet of President Museveni, he tells me he will notably be remembered at the ministry for introducing occupational health of all ministry staff members.
We have also, in terms of occupational health and safety, yes, we have made sure that we live by example. In the gender ministry, every Friday, the headquarters staff actually go for a health run and carry out some aerobics. We're showing by example, which in a way has been appreciated and has also improved on the health of the workers. And we are trying to see, I think it's going also to positively impact on the output of the staff.
Away from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is another interesting docket of government, the Ministry of Public Service. It's headed by the first Deputy Premier, Henry Muganwa Kajura. The docket in question has been dogged with several corruption scandals, the latest being the pension scam, in which government lost 96 billion shillings under his watchful eye as the political supervisor. But do Minister Kajura have anything to talk about his performance and experience at the Ministry of Public Service, where his permanent secretary, Jimmy Ramafa, his principal accountant, Christopher Obey, Commissioner in charge of pension, Stephen Kunsa Kiwenuka, and accountant Oloka Japianj.
Now, let us talk about your time at the ministry. You have been there for many years. What have been your successful stories at the Ministry of Public Service?
I think on that one I need to prepare and give you a good reaction, let me put it that way. Give me another 1 day or 2 days, I'll be able to,
thanks.
To articulate what you have asked me to do.
But do ministers like Henry Muganwa Kajura lose anything if they don't bounce back to cabinet?
I've got a little farm, and that one will keep me busy and useful.
So you're going to devote the next part of your service to your farm?
Yes, and to the people. I'm still accessible to them, I'm still friendly with them. They don't refuse to vote for me. There were other influences at work, but not my real followers.
Timothy Sibasi, Television, Kampala.